The Invisible War of Deception. The knock came at midnight. In the dim streets of wartime London, a German spy who had spent months feeding Hitler's war machine with secrets about British defences was about to make his final, fatal mistake. What he didn't know, what none of Hitler's intelligence operatives had yet realised, was that he was merely one piece in a vast, invisible war being waged in the shadows. A war not of bullets and bombs, but of deception, double crosses, and daring that would ultimately help determine the fate of civilization itself. The stories you're about to read aren't just tales of espionage. They're testament to humanity's boundless capacity for cunning and courage under the most desperate circumstances. From a dead man who fooled Hitler's entire high command, to a one-legged woman who became the Gestapo's most wanted spy, to a chicken farmer who built an empire of imaginary agents, these 5 extraordinary operations didn't just change the course of World War II. They revolutionized the art of modern intelligence gathering and wrote the playbook for every covert operation that would follow. In their hands, deception became a weapon more powerful than any battleship or bomber squadron. Operation Mincemeat, the deception that changed the course of World War II. At dawn on April 30th, 1943, a Spanish fisherman discovered the body of Major William Martin washed up on a beach near Huelva, Spain. Handcuffed to his wrist was a briefcase containing letters marked "Personal and Most Secret." Documents that would soon find their way into the eager hands of Nazi intelligence. Hitler's spy masters had just taken the bait in what would become the most audacious deception in military history. The real story had begun months earlier in Room 13 of the British intelligence headquarters, where 2 men, Charles Cholmondeley and Juan Montague, hatched a plan so outlandish it seemed destined to fail. Their scheme: to dress up a corpse as a Royal Marines officer, plant fake invasion plans on his body, and convince the Germans that the Allies planned to invade Greece rather than their actual target, Sicily. The corpse they chose belonged to a Welsh vagrant who had died from eating rat poison, transformed through meticulous attention to detail into the fictional Major Martin. The team created an entire life for their dead man. They planted love letters from a fictional fiancé in his pocket, theatre ticket stubs, and even made sure his underwear bore proper British laundry marks. A photograph of his fiancée, actually a clerk from MI5, was labelled Pam. They even gave him unpaid bills and a stern letter from his bank manager about his overdraft. These mundane details would prove crucial in selling the deception. The Spanish authorities, as predicted, shared the documents with Nazi intelligence. The German high command fell for the ruse completely. Hitler himself ordered entire divisions moved from Sicily to Greece, leaving the real invasion target drastically underdefended. When Allied forces stormed Sicily's beaches in July 1943, they faced far less resistance than expected, saving thousands of lives. Years later, captured German documents revealed that their intelligence officers had been utterly convinced by every detail of the British deception, down to Major Martin's overdrawn bank account. But the true masterstroke wasn't just in the grand deception, it was in the tiny details that made it believable. The planners even included a letter from Major Martin's father gently chiding him for losing another pair of cufflinks, knowing that German intelligence would look for such intimate details as proof of authenticity. They understood that the best lies are wrapped in layers of truth, and that sometimes the smallest, most human touches can convince more thoroughly than any official document. The success of Operation Mincemeat marked a turning point in the war, demonstrating that in modern warfare, a single corpse with carefully crafted papers could be more powerful than a division of tanks. It established a principle that would define modern intelligence operations, that in the world of espionage, espionage, making the enemy believe a lie, requires not just deception, but an understanding of human nature so profound that it can construct an entire life from nothing, and make that life more convincing than reality itself. The Quiet Resistance, the story of Virginia Hall. The Gestapo's most wanted spy walked with a distinct limp through the streets of Lyon, yet somehow remained invisible. Virginia Hall, whom the Nazis called the Limping Lady, had turned her greatest liability into her signature advantage. While German intelligence searched for a trained espionage agent, they repeatedly overlooked the unassuming American woman who used her wooden leg, nicknamed Cuthbert, to hide radio parts and secret messages. Before the war transformed her into a master of espionage, Hall had dreamed of becoming a diplomat. The US State Department rejected her application, citing a policy against hiring amputees. This rejection set her on a path that would make her far more dangerous to the Third Reich than any diplomat could have been. Operating under the code name Heron, she began building the most effective resistance network in occupied France, using her cover as a reporter for the New York Post to move freely through Nazi-controlled territory. Her network grew with remarkable ingenuity. She recruited French women as couriers, correctly guessing that the Germans would rarely suspect them. She organized resistance cells in remote mountain villages, established safe houses for downed Allied pilots, and coordinated supply drops using nothing more sophisticated than a pocket watch and exceptional mathematical precision. Her operatives sabotaged German supply lines with such effectiveness that the Nazis dedicated entire operations to finding her, never suspecting that their quarry often passed within feet of their checkpoints, disguised as an elderly milkmaid. But Hall's most daring feat came after the Gestapo finally identified her. With every border crossing monitored and her photograph in every police station, she led a group of resistance fighters across the Pyrenees Mountains, on foot in the dead of winter, with her prosthetic leg causing excruciating pain. She traversed one of the most treacherous mountain passes in Europe, evaded German patrols, and survived for 3 days in blizzard conditions. Upon reaching safety, she immediately began planning her return to France. When she did return, it was in even deeper cover. She disguised herself as an elderly peasant woman, dyed her hair grey, and shuffled through the streets of central France, wearing clothes she had deliberately aged by dragging them behind her bicycle. From this humble disguise, she coordinated attacks that destroyed German supply depots, broke resistance fighters out of Gestapo prisons, and provided Allied commanders with intelligence so accurate that they initially suspected it was German disinformation. By war's end, Virginia Hall had accomplished something unprecedented. She had operated continuously in occupied territory for years, survived multiple manhunts, and built a resistance network that liberated entire regions of France before the Allied armies arrived. The Gestapo never captured her, though not for lack of trying. In their classified communications, they referred to her as the most dangerous of all Allied spies. The irony was exquisite. The woman deemed unfit for diplomatic service had become, in the eyes of her enemies, the most fearsome Allied agent in France. Breaking Purple, the unsung heroes of code breaking. In a basement room at Arlington Hall, a secret team of cryptanalysts stared at streams of seemingly random numbers flowing across their desks. These weren't just any numbers. They were intercepted diplomatic messages between Tokyo and their embassies worldwide, encrypted using a machine the Japanese believed was unbreakable. The Americans called this encryption system Purple, and breaking it would become one of the most crucial intellectual achievements of World War II. William Friedman, the eccentric genius leading the Purple project, had been hospitalized twice from the mental strain of the work. His team wasn't just trying to crack a code. They were attempting to reverse engineer an encryption machine they'd never seen, based solely on the messages it produced. The task was so complex that many considered it impossible. But Friedman had assembled a remarkable group, including a former English teacher, a linguist who spoke 6 languages, and a young mathematician who had never intended to become a codebreaker. Their breakthrough came through an insight so brilliant it seemed obvious in retrospect. Rather than trying to decode the messages directly, they began looking for patterns in how the machine itself must work. They noticed that certain letters never encoded to themselves, a quirk that revealed crucial details about Purple's internal mechanics. Working with IBM, they built a machine that could replicate the Japanese device's operations, despite never having laid eyes on the original. The impact was immediate and devastating. When Japanese Foreign Minister Togo sent what he believed was a perfectly secure message to his Berlin ambassador in 1941, discussing Hitler's plans for invasion of the Soviet Union, American analysts were reading it before the ambassador himself. More crucially, Purple intercepts revealed Japan's growing frustration with peace negotiations in Washington, providing clear warning signs of their intentions months before Pearl Harbor. Warnings that, tragically, weren't heeded in time. The most vital intelligence came from messages between Tokyo and their Berlin embassy. Japanese diplomats provided detailed reports about German military movements, industrial capacity, and combat losses. Information they believed was absolutely secure. Instead, it gave Allied commanders an unprecedented window into Hitler's strategic thinking and capabilities. When the Germans launched their V-weapon campaign against Britain, Purple intercepts helped Allied bombers locate and destroy the launch sites. But perhaps Purple's greatest value lay in what it didn't reveal. Throughout the war, Japanese leaders never realized their diplomatic communications had been compromised. They continued sending detailed reports about military movements, economic conditions, and strategic planning, unwittingly providing Allied commanders with a real-time view of Axis strategy. In the end, Purple demonstrated a truth that would define modern signals intelligence. In an age of machine encryption, the greatest battles might be won not by soldiers or generals, but by mathematicians and linguists working in quiet rooms, armed with nothing more dangerous than pencils and paper. The master of deception, Juan Pujol Garcia and the double-cross system. On June 5, 1944, the night before D-Day, German intelligence in Madrid received an urgent message from their most trusted spy in Britain. The invasion was coming, he reported, but the target was Calais, not Normandy. This information, which Hitler's generals had been desperately seeking, came from Agent Arabel, a Spanish businessman who had spent years building an impeccable reputation with the Abwehr. What the Germans didn't know was that Agent Arabel was actually Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo by British intelligence, and he had never seen a single piece of legitimate military intelligence in his life. Pujol's journey from failed chicken farmer to master spy began with a lie so audacious it bordered on the absurd. With no espionage training whatsoever, he approached German intelligence claiming to be a fanatically pro-Nazi Spanish government official stationed in London. In reality, he had never set foot in England and was creating reports using nothing but tourist guides, movie magazines, and public train timetables. When the British discovered his operation, rather than arrest him, they recognized his extraordinary talent for deception and made him the centerpiece of their double-cross system. What made Pujol extraordinary wasn't just his ability to lie. It was his genius for creating an entire fictional world that the Germans found irresistible. He invented 27 sub-agents, each with their own backstory, personality, and motivations. There was the Welsh nationalist who hated the English, the Caribbean dock worker with a drinking problem, the Venezuelan student with access to secret facilities. Each character developed over time, experiencing personal crises, demanding more money, even dying in elaborately staged accidents when their usefulness ended. The sheer volume of his deception was staggering. Pujol sent over 4,000 messages to German intelligence during the war, averaging 20 pages per week, every line carefully crafted to reinforce his credibility while subtly advancing British objectives. He manipulated German intelligence so thoroughly that they paid him to maintain a network of spies that existed entirely in his imagination, complete with travel expenses and salary payments for agents who were purely fictional. His masterpiece was the D-Day deception. For months, he had been feeding the Germans precise details about Allied invasion plans, all false, but mixed with enough accurate but non-critical information to maintain credibility. On D-Day itself, he sent a message warning of the Normandy landings, but timed it to arrive too late to be useful, then convinced German command that this landing was merely a diversion from the real invasion yet to come. Hitler, trusting Pujol's intelligence, kept crucial divisions in reserve rather than rushing them to Normandy, giving the Allies the foothold they desperately needed. Pujol created more than just a deception network. He crafted an alternate reality so convincing that the Germans continued to believe in it long after the war. They were so grateful for his service that they awarded him the Iron Cross, making him the only person in World War II to receive both that award and the British MBE. His story stands as testament to an extraordinary truth: that sometimes the most effective weapon in war is not the ability to fight, but the ability to make your enemy believe exactly what you want them to believe. The Espionage Legacy of Richard Sorge. In September 1941, as German tanks rolled toward Moscow, a drunken German journalist stumbled out of a high-end Tokyo bar, barely able to walk straight. The Nazi embassy staff who saw him dismissed him as just another foreign correspondent who had drunk too much sake. None suspected that this man, Richard Sorge, had just gathered intelligence that would ultimately save the Soviet Union from collapse. Hours earlier, between rounds of drinks with senior Japanese officials, he had confirmed that Japan would not attack Russia, allowing Stalin to safely move hundreds of thousands of troops from Siberia to defend Moscow. Sorge's path to becoming Stalin's most valuable spy began in the beer halls of 1920s Germany, where his charismatic personality and fierce intelligence caught the attention of Soviet intelligence. His genius lay in his understanding that the best cover wasn't just a fake identity, it was a real one. He became a legitimate, respected journalist for German newspapers, writing articles that genuinely impressed Nazi leaders. He joined the Nazi Party, cultivated friendships with senior officials, and built such a convincing persona that Germany's ambassador to Japan made him his personal confidant. In Tokyo, Sorge constructed an intelligence operation of unprecedented sophistication. His network included a Japanese journalist who had infiltrated the Prime Minister's inner circle, a German embassy worker with access to diplomatic cables, and several highly placed sources in the Japanese government. But his most valuable asset was his own personality. He could drink with diplomats all night, extracting their secrets while appearing to share their confidences, then work through his hangover the next morning, writing detailed reports for Moscow. His intelligence was so precise that Stalin initially distrusted it. When Sorge provided the exact date of Germany's planned invasion of the Soviet Union, June 22, 1941, Stalin dismissed it as British disinformation. But Sorge kept sending reports, each more detailed than the last. He revealed German troop movements, military capabilities, and strategic plans with such accuracy that his information could only have come from the highest levels of the Nazi hierarchy. which, thanks to his careful cultivation of German embassy officials, it did. The beginning of his end came not through any operational mistake, but through the arrest of one of his radio operators. Japanese counterintelligence, which had been monitoring suspicious radio transmissions, finally caught a break. Even under arrest, Sorge maintained his cover so convincingly that the German ambassador personally vouched for him, insisting that no Nazi party member could possibly be a Soviet spy. It took weeks of interrogation before Japanese authorities finally accepted the incredible truth about the hard-drinking journalist who had fooled Tokyo's entire diplomatic community. Sorge faced his execution in 1944 with the same complex mix of idealism and cynicism that had marked his entire career. When asked why he had sacrificed everything to spy for Stalin, he replied simply, "I believed in the cause." The last toast in Tokyo's Foreign Correspondents' Club that night was raised to a man they thought they had known. A brilliant journalist, a dedicated Nazi, a legendary drinker, and one of the most effective intelligence operatives in history. His true legacy was written in the frozen ground outside Moscow, where the divisions Stalin had transferred from Siberia, trusting in Sorge's intelligence, had stopped Hitler's advance and changed the course of the war. The legacy of wartime espionage. On a cold morning in 1945, as Allied forces secured the last Nazi intelligence archives, they discovered something extraordinary. Nearly every major military decision of the war, from the D-Day invasion to the defense of Moscow, from the campaign in Sicily to the allocation of Japan's military resources, had been influenced by the shadow war of espionage. The victors had not just outfought their enemies, they had outwitted them through an unprecedented campaign of deception, infiltration, and code breaking that would forever change how wars are won and lost. This hidden battlefield gave birth to modern intelligence gathering. The techniques pioneered by our 5 spies became the foundation of Cold War espionage and beyond. The British double-cross system evolved into modern counterintelligence operations. The lessons from Purple's decryption sparked the computer revolution in signals intelligence. Virginia Hall's resistance networks became the model for organizing covert operations behind enemy lines. The sophisticated deceptions of Operation Mincemeat taught intelligence agencies that the most effective lies are built from layers of truth. And Sorge's deep-cover journalism showed how a spy could hide in plain sight at the highest levels of an enemy government. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of these operations isn't found in classified files or intelligence manuals. It's written in the lives that were saved. Every time a deception succeeded, every time a code was broken, every time a spy transmitted crucial intelligence, the course of battles shifted. Thousands of soldiers who would have died storming heavily defended positions instead found their objectives lightly guarded. Convoy routes changed based on intercepted messages, avoiding waiting U-boats. Resistance networks guided Allied bombers to precise targets, minimizing civilian casualties. In the end, the greatest victory of these shadow warriors wasn't just helping to win the war, it was winning it at a lower cost in human lives. Today, in anonymous office buildings and hidden rooms around the world, intelligence officers still study these operations. They analyze how a dead man fooled Hitler, how a limping woman outfoxed the Gestapo, how a chicken farmer created an army of imaginary spies, how a team of mathematicians cracked the uncrackable, and how a hard-drinking journalist became Stalin's eyes in Tokyo. In their work, the lessons of these 5 extraordinary operations live on, reminding us that in the darkest times, human ingenuity and courage can change the course of history. The end of World War II marked the beginning of a new era in global conflict, one where battles would increasingly be won or lost in the shadows, not on the battlefield. The spies who helped defeat Hitler and Toyo didn't just shape the outcome of their war, they created the template for a different kind of warfare altogether. One where deception could be more powerful than division, where information could be more valuable than artillery, and where the most crucial victories might be won without ever firing a shot.